everyone. Welcome back. This is Tammy Gustafson with Betrayal Healing and your host for the conference. And I am happy to have Nathaniel Gustafson back today. And he is going to be talking about a really important topic. And this is addressing the issue of men, the ones who have done the betraying, knowing their why and how it has really deep implications for betrayed partners. So let me tell you a little bit about Nathaniel. Nathaniel is my husband, and he is also the founder of Tenderhearted Men, a counseling and coaching practice in Colorado. He is a licensed professional counselor and a coach, and he specializes in helping couples heal from the wounds of sexual integrity issues. He has the unique ability of working with a couple, focusing on the husband while keeping the partner safe in the process. He helps men engage emotions to develop self-awareness and relational intimacy. And he offers compassion mixed with challenge, holding the needs of the individual and the couple simultaneously. Nathaniel holds both a Master's of Arts in Counseling and an MDiv and has specialized training in emotionally focused therapy and EMDR. So Nathaniel, glad to be interviewing you again on this topic.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, Nathaniel, can we start out? I think a lot of women, when their partners go to counseling, if that counselor is not really versed in betrayal trauma and versed in sexual addiction or sexual integrity issues, a lot of times they'll walk away with the message that he will never know his why. And so that can be really, well, one, that can shut the process down, right? But it can be really discouraging. So let's start out with the question of can the partner, can he know his why?
Yes. Many people, there's a presupposition that it's so complicated, so difficult, that there's no way he could possibly know his why. And so that's fraught with peril for all kinds of reasons. But by and large, the biggest thing is unless you know your why, you don't know what the future is going to hold. It's that old axiom, like, he who doesn't know history is doomed to repeat it. Unless we know why, we're not going to be able to, for ourselves, for the guy, have any confidence that we're never going to betray our wives again in that manner. But also, we can't give that safety or security to our wives to say, like, no, I know why, and I won't go back there again. So
yeah, go ahead.
How I think of it is that it's like a confluence of rivers that make one stream. And there is no one thing that makes this river, even though it is one river. And so when I work with guys, what I'm trying to do is look at the whole picture here. Like, yes, of course, your family of origin plays into it. And yes, the abuse you experienced plays into it. And yes, your church background maybe plays into, or the bias, the cultural background or baggage that you carry. All of these things play into it. But it's not any one thing that explains everything. Because abuse is one of the big ones that many people have. Like, oh, I was abused when I was 8-year-old. That explains everything. Except for the fact there are some people who were abused and didn't act out. Yeah. And so it doesn't explain everything. It explains part of it, and you need to know that. But there's a bunch of other things that are also pertinent that need to be explored.
Yeah, and I love that you hit on a little bit earlier, talking about for the betrayed partner and her safety. And I think from my perspective, there is no safety for a betrayed partner without the why.
Totally.
Like that, and that is actually an indication when he is doing good work and when he can really dig into that. That is indication of like, okay, maybe there's safety to start moving back in if you choose to. So what is important about knowing the why?
Well, I mean, part of it is what you just addressed. We guys, we do want to provide that safety. We do want to provide that security for our wives. And so we got to do the work around it. Additionally, guys, if you have a hard time talking about the past, talking about the ways that you failed your wife, talking about the betrayal, chances are you haven't sufficiently dealt with it. What we tend to find is the guys who have done really good work and really understand themselves and understand their wife, they have more freedom to talk about it in the present. Because what's going on is the less shame we have, the more able we are to talk about it. So Brene Brown, wonderful author, in numerous of her books, makes the comment that the antidote to shame is vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And what she calls vulnerability, I call intimacy. So the antidote to shame is actually being known in it. And if we know ourselves super well, then that shame diminishes. And then if we can communicate with others, our partner, other safe guys, then it becomes easier and easier and easier to talk about it. And so that's when we know the why, guys, we're able to join our wives as she experiences pain, grief, triggers, and not be dealing with our own stuff as well, our own shame, because we're solid there. We've done our work around it. That way we don't have to focus on ourselves. We're able then to focus on our wives. In Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, she makes that comment that you cannot experience both shame and empathy at the same time, because shame is a self-focused emotion and empathy is other self-focused emotion. And so what we need to do is take the shame out of our story by knowing it, by delving deep into it, by communicating with others. That way we're better able to show up for our spouse.
Boy, that's huge, because dealing with the shame is such a critical piece for the well-being of him and for the relationship and whatnot. I think that's great. Okay, so many times I have women come into my office and we talk about this, about their partner knowing the why. And they'll say, well, he does. It's because he was struggling at work, or it's because he was doing X, Y, or Z. So how does a betrayed partner know if their partner has kind of done the work to know what their why is, a good why, if you would?
Yeah, great question. So as I said before, it's not any one thing. And what I tend to find in working with guys is by the time they come to my office, they will have a why in their story. And it might be one of these things or the ones I drew up before. But I view it kind of like mining for gold. So there's a TV show, that Alaska Gold Miners, and there was one of the protagonists that he had to make the decision. Is he going to mine this soil that nobody has ever touched before, or is he going to mine this ground that is perfectly clear? So this soil has all kinds of trees and all kinds of growth and vegetation, and then there's the dirt that they're going to have to excavate before they can get to the pay dirt, right? Well, this land has never been touched. That's great. The problem with this land, though, even though it doesn't have any of that clearing that needs to take place, is it was the slag dirt from the first gold rush. Now, why am I talking about gold? A lot of times when we do historical work, we're looking for the big gold nuggets, just like the people in the first gold rush were looking for. Like they were looking for big particulates. And so they were content with that. But the problem is there was lots of stuff in the soil that was left behind. And so back to the show, what the guy decided to do is, rather than waste all the money clearing all the trees and all that kind of stuff, he was just going to mine this stuff again. And because one, there was like a different set of crew, different crew that were going over it again. But two, like the tools that they had to mine that had changed in the 150 years. And so they actually had better tools to go back on that level of dirt and to get more of the fine grained stuff. So back to our reality. when a guy does historical work, he can't just be looking for the big chunks. Oh, I was abused when I was a kid, or work was really stressful. It needs to be, those big chunks, but also everything else. He's got to go over it and over it and over again, with better and better sets of eyes to evaluate things. So back to your question, how will she know if it's a good why or not? Does it feel right? Like, does it feel complete? Like, gals, ask yourself in your gut, like, is that all of it? So like the work one gets tossed around a lot, right? This one has very little merit in my book as explaining the whole story. Why? Because there have been times in his life where he also had intense stress and he didn't act out. Or there are going to be times in the future where he has intense stress, intense work environment, pains, and he can't work out. So if it's always work is stressful for me, therefore I act out, then that's not giving her any safety, security, comfort, or anything else.
So I like that analogy of the going back and the digging through the gold that second time, or digging through the soil, because from my perspective, I see like that first, the big nuggets, that might be the stuff that if he gathers that and if he deals with it, that might get him sober, right? But it's almost like going back through those other times. That's the deep character work that's really going to make a difference. That's the family of origin stuff. That's the deeper stuff that's going to make difference long term. So Nathaniel, what is the process for figuring out the why? Kind of what some people think is not possible, what is elusive, all of that. Like you really have a process for figuring this out. So can you walk us through that?
Sure. So I focus on 3 E words to start with. And what I want to do is I want to move from excuses. Let me try again here. I'm going to write that differently. What we focus on is this. We first look at the past, then we move to the present, and then the future. It sounds pretty easy, but it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. And the thing that we're looking for is we're looking for the imprint of the past, which has an impact of the present. And what we want to do is we want to shape our future intentions. Okay, so as we said with our gold mining analogy, we're looking at the past, not just for those big nuggets, but also for these small particulates. And the framework that I use is the levels of communication. If you've seen other things by me, I always come back to this framework to look at things. There's the data or the behavior. There's what happened. Below that's our thoughts about it. Below that are our emotions. And then the deepest level, which is oftentimes in my office a core wound or a need. It can also be a dream, a value, a desire. Like the deepest level of why we do what we do is found here. And so when we look at the past, we will run a timeline and major events along that timeline. And then we look at how they inform how we view the world. So what I'll have guys do is I'll literally have them do a timeline from 0 to 18, marking major events that happened during their life. And from there, we'll look at the lessons and the lies that come out of those. So inevitably, as they have, 100 data points, and they work it through, this is what happened, this is what I was thinking about it, this is what I felt back in the day, and here's where it went for me. I felt like I didn't matter. I felt like I wasn't important. Then we take that and we see patterns in that. So a lot of the reoccurring themes at this level ends up being the lessons or the lies that we have, such as my needs don't matter. I can't speak up for myself. Right? So we develop some of those lessons and lies, and then we start to carry them forward. How did those lessons and lies shape the way we view the world? And that's our impact or our lens of life. We have glasses on that were informed by this stuff back here that interpret how we look at the world around us. Okay, so if back here, the imprint was, I don't matter. And that's one of the primary lessons he learned, one of those primary wounds that happened over and over and over again. Now, when he shows up in the present, and his wife and he are in a fight, and she glares at him. He's going to say, she glared at me. She's going to go, what? Right? But she glares at him. What's going on in the present is he isn't reacting to his wife. He's also reacting with that lens that was informed by this.
Totally.
And so he's totally reactive in the present because of that lens. And he's fighting this battle right here. And you can feel that tension when wives go like, oh my goodness, we weren't even talking. I did not say that you don't matter. I said, I'm upset how you treated our kids. Those are two different things. Like what I said was this, and what you heard was this. And so bringing it forward to the present is incredibly important in order to know like, wow, in order for me to respond differently, I can't react to this stuff anymore. All right, but we don't stop there. We also go into the future. Now, I'm going to pause real quick and put those different words up, 3 different E words. Oftentimes when I'm working with couples, and I do this type of thing, if we solely look at the past, a gal will feel as if this is all excuses.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, your dad beat you. Oh, your 3rd grade teacher said you lied on a test. It all feels like excuses because there were people in the world who had all the same stuff happen to them and they didn't do what you did. It's all an excuse. Right? And so then if he does that work and then he carries it forward to recognize, wow, all of this stuff is impacting how I am in the present. A gal might go, okay, well, that helps explain everything. But you can hear in the tone of my voice, that doesn't give me a lot of comfort. That explains a few things, but what? Because what she's looking for is something towards the future. And what we need to do is move from excuses to empowered. Okay. Now, many times, a guy will have a future intent and cast a vision for who he wants to be, but it's not anchored in reality. This image of his future and this desire of who he wants to be has nothing to do with who he's been because he hasn't done this historical work. And so it's detached from reality. And that's one of the reasons why he never hits his goal, is because it's totally disinformed based on his history. All right. So when we shape our intent for the future, we have to do this work, saying this is what I carry. This is the lens that I look in life. And so in order for me to reach my goals here, I need to make concrete steps overcoming this type of stuff as I work toward this goal. Okay, so let's use this example. Like, I don't matter, and in the present, he thinks I'll never be enough, because that's how it comes out. In the future, if his desire is no longer to be this, but to be stable and allow his wife, okay, let's say this is his future goal. I want my wife to have freedom to confront me in a healthy way without me retaliating and becoming defensive. Like, that's a beautiful goal, right?
Totally.
But right now we see, oh, it's definitely going to hit this, because anytime she confronts him, he's got this stirring and this stirring back here. So now it's not just a pie in the sky. I want to be non-defensive when she confronts me. Now we go concrete with it to go, okay, in order for that to be my reality, I need to start combating these lies. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to start to make a 3x5 card and have 6 truth statements about my true identity and my worth, such that even my wife can attack me, and I'm solid that I know I've done well. And so then I'm going to rehearse these 6 truth statements so that I'm able to reaffirm the truth, such that even if somebody is mean to me, I don't have to react in a bad way anymore. And that's where it works all together. That makes sense?
Yeah, Nathaniel, it feels so solid. I mean, this feels so boots on the ground to understand, like, not only to understand your why, and I think that's like in that first step with the timeline and all that kind of stuff and all this put together, but also there's so much hope, and it feels like it does give them so much power and so much empowerment and so much, yeah, creating hope that he actually knows what he can do to get to that place. And for a betrayed partner to have your person go through this and to be able to explain it, be able to name, like, hey, here's are some of the things I'm overcoming, here's some of the things I'm hearing, but here's what I'm going to do about it.
Yeah.
Like, that would create safety. That would create, we hear all the time from women, how do I know he's doing good work? Well, if he can do that, he's doing really good work, right?
Yeah. Now, there's one more thing in all of this that's really important, because guys can do all of this and it still lands flat for gals. And here's why. There's one more E word, and that E word is empathy.
Yeah. Totally. Right? Yeah.
If we're above here and looking at this stuff, it's all about him. And
yeah.
He hasn't done the work to go, and here's how it impacts you.
Yeah.
Right? There's a profound, there's many. There's a profound injustice when guys start their recovery work, because it necessarily does need to be focused on him. But the gal will oftentimes just be exhausted going, great, you've been lying to me our whole marriage. It's always been about you, your lies, your needs. And now it still needs to be about you after betrayal. Like, this is not fair. And it's not. Which is why it cannot stay up here. It needs to come down to the empathy area. And how I view that is, don't have enough time to go into all of it, but by and large, it has to do with, like, who gets the emotional energy, who gets the focus. If it's about him, his needs, his feeling not enough, his dealing with his past, it's all about him. And that's not going to feel right for her. What he needs to do is go, okay, there's a way for me to talk about this stuff where the energy is on her. And so we carry it forward and say, like, honey, in the past, you've tried to confront me. And because I hadn't dealt with any of this stuff, I always got defensive, and I blame shifted you. And that you wanted too much from me, that you were unrelenting, you were nitpicking. I see now that that's on me, and that wasn't fair to you. You needed to have freedom to be able to bring your concerns without me tail spinning. I'm so sorry I did that to you. Like, so he's naming all of this stuff, but he's doing it in a way that honors her and what emotions she's going through in having dealt with this.
Boy, I feel like that is the missing link, because sometimes the model is, hey, let's split them up. He needs to deal with his stuff. She needs to deal with her stuff, right? Or, like you're saying, there out of necessity, he has to do work and he has to dig in, but he can't just walk away and leave her as he's trying to heal. And so I think what you just described is how he can do his work, but also how his work can be marriage work. And it's that final piece of bringing it back to the empathy and informing all of that to help connect with her.
Yeah.
And man, that would go a long ways in the healing.
Yeah. When I'm working with couples, like you said, sometimes it's like either or. And I don't think it has to be. It can be a both and, but it takes a lot more work on his
Yeah.
part in particular, because he's got to do this and this concurrent over here, concurrent with one another, and neither of which he's necessarily good at or has a history of doing. So he's got to learn and learn fast, especially in order to get that empathy place for her.
Well, and I think most betrayed partners too, if they see their partner doing this kind of work, like they don't have to be perfect in knowing what to say and knowing how to say it or, all that kind of stuff. But if he is trying and he is making strides, that goes a long ways.
Yeah,
Goes a long ways.
totally.
So, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to reaffirm what I tend to see when guys are doing good work. Gals are oftentimes cautiously patient.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she can tell if he's checking the box, if he's doing the bare minimum, if he's doing it because he was told to do it, or if he's really trying and failing. And if he's really trying and failing, like, oh, I didn't figure this out, or I can't see how this links to this, she's usually really patient with it because she sees his effort. She sees his sincerity. And then he's going back to the drawing board and trying again rather than going to a place of self pity or shame or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, are there different types of why questions?
Love it. Yes, totally, totally. Um, so his why and her why are two different things.
Hmm.
Okay. His why is kind of understanding his story, explaining why he did what he did, what the driver was there, how the acting out behavior was a symptom of the problem. Like that's his why. Her why, completely different. And oftentimes guys will get really frustrated because they come to me and I tell them to show up and empathize and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, but I try answering her questions and it's never good enough for her. And so there's two types of why that a gal tends to have that I see. There may be more. One is a cognitive based why. Like, I need to understand what's going on here. I need to know that you know what's going on here. So it's a cognitive based why. There's a different form of why. And it's kind of, why did you do this to me?
Mm.
It's a grief based why. Right? And so if we think of the 5 basic components of grief, of denial, hopelessness, anger, bargaining, acceptance, we know that grief is not linear from point A to point Z. Instead, it's all over the place. But what I see that form of why, the grief-based why is bargaining. If I could understand why he did it, then I can invest my future with him. And so then he gives, you can feel that question is kind of a safety-based question.
Yeah.
And so what he'll do is he'll explain, well, here's my past. And then she checks internally and is like, I'm still not safe, so that's not it. Why did you do this to me? And then he tries again and he answers a different part of the why question. And she checks in with herself and she's like, I'm still not safe. So generally what I say is, if you feel like you're playing a game of whack-a-mole, that's probably a grief-based why. Now, guys, fellas, be careful how you interpret that. What I'm not saying is, if it's grief, then don't deal with it.
Mm.
No. If it's grief, then you approach it differently, but you still approach it, right? So rather than giving it cognitive answer to a grief-based question, you join her in that grief. You come to her and honor those big emotions. Now,
Because you're saying if it's grief based, whenever he answers the question, she's going to have another one, and she's going to have another one, and she's going to have another one, because he's answering it with cognitive, and that's not going to touch her heart. That's not going to satisfy it. So it's going to keep coming up.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
And so, gals,
Yeah.
when that's happening to you, you are not crazy. You're not being a jerk. You're not holding it over him or rubbing his nose in it. You're not being mean. You're
Yeah.
grieving. And
Yeah.
you're doing the very best you can to let him participate in that grief by going, hey, I keep coming back to you and saying, why? And that's you grieving. That's great. Keep doing that.
Well, and I think in our story, I got stuck here a little bit because I was like, if I could just wrap my head around it, maybe it wouldn't hurt so much.
Right.
Like if I can just wrap my head around, maybe I can put this part to rest. And the reality is you can't heal a heart wound with your head.
Correct.
You can't heal a heart wound with your intellect or finding out the why. So keep going. I think that's really important, that differentiation between them.
Yeah, I mean, and that's pretty much it. Is like, guys, if you find yourself discouraged that you keep cognitively answering her why question with your past, then that's your hint that you need to start empathizing with her instead of answering the cognitive question.
So, Nathaniel, as I'm listening to you, and I love the process that you outlined on the board, it feels so solid. But I think it might be helpful to actually like have an example of what it means, like a why. Like give us an example of a why, like what that might be, and run it through your process.
Okay. And I kind of touch on it here and here, but I don't think I actually address it here. So let's go back. Let's say growing up, I'm trying to relate it back to this type of stuff. On your birthday, Dad always had a traveling engagement. Okay. So like his annual meetings were on your birthday every year. So what happened behavior wise, Dad was gone on my birthday. My thoughts about it, and this was me, by the way. My thoughts about it, my dad was a pastor, so, he's doing God's work. And who am I to thwart God's work? Right? So my emotions at a very, very young age, I was angry, but how my family dealt with anger was, by shoving it or by spiritualizing it. Right? So you can hear some of my rationalizations through the spiritual lens up here. Who am I to question God's work? This is what he wants. And so I can't get in the way of my dad or his ministry. But what is that left me with? What was my core wound? I, matter. The people matter more than I do. So the church matters more than I do. And then that lens, or the lesson was like, I just don't matter. And that was reinforced in a few other places. So then carrying that forward, Tammy, when you would disagree with me, I was so sensitive in these areas, and it could be something silly. It didn't have to be a big thing of life. It can be something really mundane. I was so sensitive because of this type of wound that I got super defensive and like stonewalled you when that button was hurt. And so then carrying that forward, and this is something I still have to anchor in. Wait, no, I do matter. And so like there's one book in particular that I read when I'm feeling like I don't matter, to come back to that book to remind myself. And so that's part of my plan of addressing the future, is like, if I'm feeling a deficit down here, I need to charge myself up. And here's how I do it, by reading this book.
Mm-hmm. And so that's a powerful example. So thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that. That makes sense. And I think So if I'm looking at this and I'm looking at it, it's like that example is one of the things that led towards you numbing out with
Correct.
pornography, right?
Yes.
And so there might actually be several things. It might not be one of those. I forget if you can move the imprint, the excuses. One of those things that led to
Right.
numbing out with pornography, right?
Right. And so like here, I spirit, and that's why we call it the symptom. The acting out behavior is a symptom of the problem. The problem for me wasn't pornography. The real problem was I didn't know how to deal with this type of stuff.
Right. And so men might actually have several of these kind of hot buttons, several of these triggers, right? These
Totally.
internal triggers based on the work that they do from the past, based on the lens and the wounds that they have. And so then figuring those out, and they all kind of combined together and contributed to the addiction, to the acting out, to whatever you want to call it. And so it sounds like this process is not a one and done thing, too, but this process is mining it, like you're saying, of going back of like, what are the other triggers? What are the other messages that I heard? And any one of those probably contributed to this addiction. So
Right.
going back and figuring them all out.
So it's those confluence behaviors, right?
Okay, got it.
And where this schema is really helpful is it, it doesn't just have to start with the past and move forward. Let's say you blow your top of your kids. You can start here going, okay, in the present, I messed something up. What do I need to go back to the past with? Like, what were the lenses that I was carrying in the present and going back to the past? Or maybe there's something in the future you keep working toward, you keep working toward, you keep working toward, and you can't get it. Okay, run it through this matrix again, going, okay, there's probably something here and probably something here. Like you can start anywhere and start working around for it. So it can be a continued tool for you.
Oh, that's great. Okay, awesome. I love it. So, Nathaniel, as we start to wrap up, um, tell us if people are like, if people want to connect with you for coaching, for counseling, if they're here in Colorado, um, how can they do that?
Yep. The best way to get a hold of me is through my website, tenderheartedmen.com. There's a connection page that you can, fill out a form and contact me. There's also, you can sign up for my mailing list. And so I periodically or episodically give some articles that I've written, some hints, some reminders of things that you should be focusing on. I also have a workshop that is this on steroids.
Totally on steroids.
Yeah, and so I make it known we're putting the work in workshop, and so we have goes over 4 weeks, and then I have nightly homework that should last about an hour every night for those 4 weeks. And so it's intensive to try to get at the heart of this and to figure out this tool and put it into practice so that you begin over and over and over again to know yourself and then show up for your wife. And so at my website, you can find there's a tab up top that says workshop or something like that. I'm going to be running this workshop, the Know Your Why workshop, February 8th. I can't do math. Thursdays in February, starting on the 8th.
Awesome. Well, and I love this because really you're taking a group of men and you are walking them step by step. So boots on the ground so they can go home and do their homework and then they can come back the next week and you're taking them through the next step. I mean, it is a deep dive into themselves. It is a deep dive into their why and how powerful for the betrayed partners on the other end to be reaping that benefits and to be seeing their husband or their partner doing the work and then also the
Totally.
communication, the empathy coming back. So guys, I hope you check out the workshop. Really powerful stuff. So Nathaniel, thank you for diving into this with us today, and thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon.